Please welcome UKIP leader Nigel Farage.
This is more fun. Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. 40 years ago, we were inveigled into voting to stay part of a common market on the basis that it was all about trade and nothing to do with politics. And those of you over the age of 58 who voted for that common market undoubtedly feel that you were lied to. And 40 years on, we're fighting a referendum where the Remain side, or the Romanians, as I think they're now known, but I'll come on to immigration later. The Remain side have clubbed together. They've got Goldman Sachs, they've got Siemens Engineering, they've got the International Monetary Fund, they've got Obama, they've got the political class, at least most of them, in Westminster, telling us that if we do not stay part of this political union, dreadful things will happen to us because we have this wonderful trade deal being part of the European Union. They are doing it, they are putting the Leave camp on the back foot, and they're doing it to try and put us off the main arguments in this referendum. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a good deal with the European Union. For access to the single market, we pay a membership fee, we have the free movement of people, we have a massive regulatory burden, and we're prohibited and stopped from making our own trade friendships with the rest of the world. Do not believe them when they tell you tonight that the single market is good for Britain, that we need to be part of this club to access the single market. Every country in the world accesses the single market, and even in the worst case scenario, that Britain does not have a successful renegotiation and simply has to rely on WTO rules, even in that scenario, the cost of tariffs would be less than our net contribution. So don't listen to politicians who've never bought and sold a cargo or a product or a good in their lives. Business is done because consumers choose to buy products at the right price. Now, the real debate in this referendum is we have an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to vote to take back the independence, self-governance and control of this country's laws, of this country's courts, and crucially, of this country's borders. And I'm urging you tonight to support this motion. I believe in democracy. I believe that if you get a government that makes bad laws, you should, after 5 years, be able to turf them out and replace them with somebody else who undoes the damage that they've done. When a European law is made, there is nothing that you, the voters, the House of Commons, or the British government can do to reverse a single piece of European legislation. There is no direct democratic accountability within this European system, and frankly, I believe that those that went before us and sacrificed so much in 2 world wars did so that we could be a free, independent, sovereign nation that governs itself. And part of that is we've lost control of our borders. Net migration into Britain is now running at 10 times the post-war average, and that's if you believe the official figures, which frankly I don't. We have to build a new house in this country every 7 minutes just to cope with current levels of immigration. We are short tens of thousands of primary school places for this September, and the National Health Service is under literally intolerable pressure. What we need to do is take back control of our borders, to say that our passport should not be available to 508 million people, and let's put in place, post-Brexit, a sensible, proper, normal immigration policy along the style that the Australians do. Let's have people with skills and trades to bring. Let's have people who haven't got criminal records, which is novel for the Aussies, isn't it? And let's
1 minute.
And let's have people who will add and contribute to the economy, but let's have them in sensible numbers. And in this age of terrorism, when you remember that 2 of the people that caused the massacre in Paris had come into Europe posing as migrants through the Greek islands, we'll be safer and better and more secure taking back control of our borders, putting in place a proper immigration system, getting back the sovereignty of our parliament and our courts, re-embracing the parts of the world that we've turned our backs on, like the Commonwealth and elsewhere, whilst at the same time being friends and neighbours with all of those in Europe. This opportunity must not be passed up. Let's take back control of our lives. Let's believe in ourselves. Let's believe in Britain. Let's believe in a better, stronger future for our nation. Thank you.
Persecution and violence, they just want to be safe. We've got to have a slightly more adult conversation about immigration. People moving large distances in large numbers happens in every continent around the world. It is not something created in Brussels by the European Union, and it is profoundly misleading to claim otherwise.
Nigel Farage, quick reply.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nick, but the British passport is now held by 508 million people, any of whom can come to this country. And I would say the reason that Australia and Canada, pro rata, can take more migrants than we can is they've got rather more space and rather more room than we have.
But net migration from outside the EU is higher than net migration from inside the EU.
Yeah, and that's bad British government, and I agree with that, and I'm not saying that all of our faults have come from the EU. There's a lot needs sorting out at Westminster too. But the fact is, we have an open door, and we're members of a European Union whose stated aim is to bring in new countries, like Bosnia, like Albania, and crucially, Mrs. Merkel, and she's the real boss these days, and Mrs. Merkel wants Turkey to be a member by 2025. So we're part of a union that is letting in poorer and poorer countries who ultimately will have unrivaled free access to our nation. And I think the point has come, frankly, where enough is enough.
On the continent and in our region, I think people often forget that in the 70-odd years before the EU came into being, France and Germany went to war no less than 3 times, and a lot of blood was spilled as a result. Now, I wouldn't say that since then, and of course it would be absolutely unthinkable for that to happen now, I wouldn't say that since then the only reason that we've had peace in Europe has been because of the European Union. NATO, of course, has played a role, but my gosh, it has made a tremendous contribution to ensuring that we don't have that kind of situation happening again, because we work together to solve common challenges. And I think one of the biggest things that worries me about politics in advanced economies is that, look, globalization has brought a huge amount of uncertainty. People feel incredibly insecure. There are lots of opportunities, but it's also quite frightening, the change too. Now, of course, there's a natural human instinct in that sense, and in that context, to look at who do we blame for all this uncertainty and insecurity? And juxtaposed against that is a desire to actually work with others to tackle the big challenges that we face. Now, I'd much rather we adopt the latter position than the kind of former, if I call it, Donald Trump view of the world, where we just seek to blame everybody for our problems instead of working together with others who share our values to meet these big common challenges that we have.
All right,
Isn't there a fundamental point about democracy?
Quickly, Nigel Farage.
I mean, the
to go to
question
Alan
was
Gibbs next.
was trying to credit the European Union with spreading democracy. Well, the European Union is very good at encouraging the growth of democracy in countries until they join the European Union. And then it's very good at trying to take away democracy from them. I explained to you earlier that the people who have the sole right to propose legislation and the reform of legislation within the European system are the unelected European Commission. And when they propose the law, and it's gone through the machine, there is nothing the voters or national parliaments or national governments can do to change a single piece of legislation. It is not just undemocratic, the system is fundamentally anti-democratic, and it's got so bad that during the Eurozone crisis, we even saw the Premier of Greece and the Premier of Italy removed, virtually by a coup d'etat, from the European Commission and replaced with former Goldman Sachs employees. The European Union is the death of democracy. For that reason, if nothing else, we should leave it and get back to being a self-governing democratic nation.
All right, thank you. Next question. Nigel Farage, just looking at some of the things you've been saying recently, am I right in thinking that you don't care anymore if we're part of the single market?
Well, the question was very interesting. This single market, Stuart, is a fable. Services. Liz talked about completing the single market in services. It's been going since 1986, and still we're no nearer to British insurance companies being able to freely sell their products in Germany. The point
Maybe
about
you need
access,
to do your job better,
the
Nigel.
point about access to the single market is we keep, well, but the point is, in services, financial services, it's got us nowhere. And we keep hearing the Remain side say, to access the single market, we have to pay a membership fee. Oh, no, we don't. To access the single market, we have to have the free movement of people. Oh, no, we don't. Stuart, the answer to your question is, every country in the world has access to the single market. The single market is nothing to do with politicians, it's consumers. Business in the world isn't done by politicians, it's done by consumers who choose to buy our products if they like the price and trust the reliability. Andrew, I'd rather we had a sensible free trade deal with what is now the biggest export market for the Eurozone in the world. But even if that went wrong, as Stuart implies in his question, the cost of tariffs, even in the worst case scenario, would be less than our current level of contribution. And while I'm at it, I keep hearing Norway. I keep being told by everybody from the panel
I've not
here,
heard Norway. Has anyone mentioned
well,
Norway?
it's very odd. It's
Who's
very odd.
mentioned Norway?
But
Stand up.
everybody keeps saying, wouldn't it be dreadful if we were like Norway? Wouldn't it be awful? Can you imagine being rich, free, and able to catch your own fish? Norway doesn't sound too awful to me.
Andrew, do you know what the Norwegians, this supremely sovereign, free nation of fish eaters, do you know what they call their membership of the European Economic Area? They call it fax democracy. And do you know why? They call it fax democracy because they have to abide by the rules. They have to abide by the rules. They have to abide by the rules of the single market to have access to it, and they have no say over the rules whatsoever. They are written by other countries. They're faxed to Oslo. They have to. Where is the control and sovereignty in that?
And what does the latest opinion poll in Norway say? In fact, what have opinion polls over the last 15 years consistently said about whether they should join the EU? 79% of Norwegians prefer this imperfect deal with their fax machines to what we have, which is having to apply 100%.
You are making the case, Dan, you are making the case, not an opinion polls, you're making
into Putin's hands, and I don't want to see that happen.
Nigel Farage, is it not a concern that all of our allies, most famously recently our most important ally, the United States, want us to stay, but the one country that probably doesn't is Russia?
I think what's a concern is that the European Union has been very deliberately and openly provocative towards Russia. The idea, and Mr. Cameron, in fact, has been in the vanguard of this, very much so. I mean, ever since David Cameron became Conservative Party leader, one of his big ambitions is that the European Union should extend to include the Ukraine. Now, we're moving down the track towards that. Already, we've got a visa access free deal with the Ukraine being negotiated. The Dutch voted against it in a referendum the other week, though I suspect they'll probably just be ignored. And the point about Putin is leave Ukraine as a buffer state. I don't like the way he operates. I would never want to live in his country, but let's not be openly provocative on Putin.
Nobody
and I worry,
forces
and I worry,
anybody to
and I worry,
annex a part of another
but I worry
country.
that we're part of a European Union, which, if we remain within it, now intends to have a strong foreign policy and is hell-bent on creating its own European army. Now, I said this in 2014, and old Cleggers over here said that it was a dangerous fantasy to suggest there'd ever be a European army. Nick, they're building it. Increasingly, this is a militarized European Union, and I don't like the look of it. I prefer NATO, where sovereign states cooperate together.
Nick Clegg, are we building a European army?
No, Nigel is willfully confused. He's talking about the border force that quite rightly is being put in place to try and monitor the. But can I just say we've heard something quite extraordinary this evening. We've heard Nigel Farage say that we or Brussels or somebody has provoked Putin.
Yes.
He marched into Ukraine and annexed Crimea. Brussels didn't do that. The European didn't do that. And the only reason The only reason why his aggression, his continued aggression in what is now a frozen conflict in eastern Ukraine, the only reason he's showing any restraint whatsoever is because Russian exporters, the Russian economy, is massively dependent on the economic superpower at its neighbours, which is at its borders, which is the European Union, and that economic superpower has imposed meaningful sanctions. That is a absolutely crystal clear example of clout that we would never have on our own in the face of what I consider to be immoral, illegal, and unacceptable aggression, and I think it's outrageous that he tries to excuse it.
Well,
All right.
Andrew,
We will move on.
Andrew, can I
You've all
just...
had a say on that. Let me get a question out from Pips Taylor. Pips Taylor. Speak to me, Pips.
Hi. If we vote to leave the EU, could it lead to the breakdown of the United Kingdom?
Will it lead to the break-up, I think, of the United
That's what I
Kingdom?
meant, yeah, break up.
Don't worry.
Thanks for that, cheers.
It's my humble job to
Staying in,
make
but will
sure
lead to the
you
breakdown of-
say what you want. Wait till I get to you. Just relax. Pretty well, and much of Europe hasn't. We have managed to attract some of the best and the brightest of Europe to come and work in our country. Why would you want to stop that?
Because when you have an open door, you will attract some of the best and the brightest, but you will also attract a number of people that you'd rather hadn't come in the first place. We're not even able to stop foreign criminals from Europe coming into our country, and we should be able to do so. David, the question, if we vote to remain, what will we be able to do to control immigration? The answer is we won't be able to control immigration if we stay in the European Union. And these lies, I mean, Cameron spent 10 million quid of your money putting a leaflet through your door telling you that if you vote to remain, we will retain border controls. All we do is ask people to flash a passport. We are completely, effectively borderless. 500 million people can freely come here. And let me predict that with the EU enlarging, including Turkey, and given that the Eurozone is headed back into serious crisis, and Greece will need to be bailed out again at some point in the course of this year, the numbers of people fleeing poverty in Europe can only increase, and we need to be tough about this. We need to make sure that we take Andrew, the brightest and the best, but we've got to do so in limited numbers. This is the #1 issue in British politics. Every single poll says immigration, security, jobs are at the top of people's agenda in Britain, and the only way of dealing with this is to vote to leave the European Union and take back control of our borders.
Can I just clarify one point? I understand that if we leave the EU, we'd have more control over who comes to work here from the EU. I take that point. But would we have any more control over EU citizens who are coming to visit us? I mean, do you envisage that to control that, you would introduce visas for EU citizens?
No, I don't think we should need to do that at all. I don't see any need for us to have visas, but I do see the absolute need for people, if they want to get jobs, to register so we know who they are, how long they're going to be here for, and that we don't even consider paying benefits or entitlements to anybody until they've legally been in the country, worked for 5 years, paid taxes into the system, and obeyed the law.
Nick
and that is
Clegg.
plain common sense, frankly.
Nick Clegg.
And that's what the population wants.
I think, David, the blunt sort of truth is, and I...
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.